Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm taking a look at the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of price. So this is my $2,300 Freestyle setup. Now before I go any further, my channel has always been about the budget end of the hobby, or getting the most out of your money at least. And recently I checked out all of those $100 quadcopters, and I thought it'd be fun to check out the premium side of things straight after those. Now, this isn't something that I've just gone out and bought outright. In fact, it's taken me about a year to save and get all of the parts. And the frame I've had for a couple of years. It was actually from a premium build that I did on the channel back in the day, and it got a bit outdated, so I've updated the components. So it's the Impulse Alien frame, and you can get it with a deal at the moment, which includes the Mr. Steele PDB, and that costs £102 sterling or 134 US dollars. And at that price, we are already overtaking some of those bind and fly micros out there. So why the Alien frame? Isn't it like 2 years old and really heavy? And the answer is yes, it's 2 years old, but it's not broken in that time. And yeah, it's real heavy. In fact, it's 672 grams with a 1500 milliamp 4S battery. And isn't heavy like bad? And the answer is no, not for freestyle flying. So I've been trying to get out more this year to events and flying with friends, and I always took a lightweight race copter with me. And while my model was always the quickest, everyone else was flying a reverb or a remix, or dare I say it, a Martian, and when I compared my footage to theirs, my footage sucked. So first of all, the Freestyle frame gets the props out of the shot. So if you are in a epic location, such as huge cooling towers, and you have props in the shot, to me it doesn't look as cinematic as with a Freestyle model. Secondly, a Freestyle frame can have your battery mounted on the top of the copter, which means that you can get your shots much lower to the ground, or you can even slide along the ground or across a wall, or even grind like a skateboard, and you can't do any of this easily with a bottom mounted battery. Tend to find that the center of gravity is a little bit better with the battery on the top as well, and the copter generally flies nicer for camera filming. And I find that the extra weight of a Freestyle copter gives it that smoothness that you don't quite get with a race setup. Now, race quads for me tend to give a more twitchy kind of video feed regardless of the rates, but they are much faster around a racetrack, and that's why there is a need for both Freestyle copters and race setups. You know, there's a couple in there that can do both, but for me, building a specific Freestyle copter is better if you can afford it. You'll get better footage. So on to the specifications of this thing, and starting off with the motors, I've already reviewed these on the channel, and they are the RC InPower 2306 2500 kV, and they are 16 quid a corner, making that £64 sterling or $84. And the props are the Dal Cyclone 5046. Now, I could go more premium on the motors, but I just really like these motors. They're a little bit cheaper than the more premium brands from Brother Hobby and Hype Train, and it flies superb on these, so I have no reason to swap them out. So I'm going to move on to the camera next, and this is actually an original HS1177 with a 2.1mm lens. I paid $37.99 sterling for it, or I think that's 48 US dollars. There will be some differences in the conversion rate as this video ages. Now, you could argue that this isn't a premium price for these days, and there are cheaper and better cameras out there now, but for me, this is good enough. So the VTX I'm using is now my favourite VTX. It's the Immersion RC Tramp HV, and I just love it, mainly because you can switch the settings on it without even powering the copter on at all. It uses NFC, so you can download the app to your phone, and you can change the frequency and the power without even plugging a battery in it, and that to me is just fantastic. I just have one complaint, and that is that I think it needs an MMCX connector, because I've already broke one of these micro UFL connectors, and this isn't a cheap VTX. So Immersion RC, if you are listening, I'm sure you have 100 reasons why MMCX is no good, but for me it needs changing because this has broke. And that costs around £35 sterling or $46. And the antenna is a TBS Triumph, and those are 35 quid for two of those, or another $46. So onto the guts, and everything is KISS. So we have the KISS 32 amp ESCs running D-Shot 2400, along with the voice firmware, which I actually really like. Those are a whopping 100 GBP for 4, or 131 US dollars, and they are connected to the Mr. Steele PDB, which is already included in the price. And lastly, we have the KISS V2 F7 flight controller, and I think that costs 59 GBP or $77. So why go KISS when it's so expensive? And I think for me, recently, I've started to get a bit fed up with Betaflight. You know, they're adding new features and trying new things, and I think it's starting to alienate the beginner. And although I'm not sure KISS is the answer, it's definitely easier to set up than Betaflight these days. One thing that is a pain with KISS is that the on-screen display is not built into the chip, which is a standard these days with Betaflight, and I think it should be there. And that's where the Mr. Steele PDB comes into place, because it's got the KISS on-screen display built into it, so you can see the USB thing on the side there. You do have to program it separately, and one thing that is annoying is that when you do program it, you have to remove the two JST clips that connect it to the flight controller. And another annoying thing with the Mr. Steele PDB is that the settings file is separate to actually loading the end result. So you flash the settings file to the PDB, you set everything up, and it's got a couple of nice features in there, such as, you know, do you want 25 milliwatt when it's disarmed, and do you want full power when it's armed, and things like that. However, you then have to reflash the on-screen display once you've done the setup, and you have to plug in those two plugs. It's just really clunky compared to Betaflight, and I think if I was trying to sell this system to people, then it's that is going to put them off. But for me, it's no more complicated than trying to figure out what feed forward figure to use, or what D-set point weight figure to use, or what filter to use in Betaflight. All of that is just getting too complicated for me, so I'm a big fan of the KISS setup. And yet the on-screen display, it's a little bit of a pain, but actually there's some good things in there that I think is better than Betaflight on-screen display. And you can set up your PWM values for your RSSI. So with Crossfire, you can set up the RSSI quality signal, and then you can input that into the settings, and you know, it's all very good in that sense. It's just setting it up as a pain, but once it's set up, it's as good, if not better, than the Betaflight on-screen display. So just as I mentioned, the connections from the Mr. Steele PDB to the flight controller are just two JST connectors, and once those are plugged in, then, you know, there's no soldering required. One thing to take note of, though, is that you can use this with both KISS V1 and V2, but the connectors are in a different orientation, so you have to make sure that you get that correct, otherwise you could end up damaging your flight controller. Now the PDB also has a built-in regulator that can output either 5 volt, I guess for a Unify, or 7.5 volt for your VTX. In this case I'm using the Tramp, so that's quite good. You've just got a jumper on there, and it's also got all of the solder pads for your camera's input and the VTX's output, just like modern Betaflight flight controllers have, but it's on the PDB. And if you use the Tramp protocol like I am here, then you can also connect the microphone up to the audio line whilst using the Tramp audio at the same time. So we're going to get audio over the top of the VTX if you like to hook up a headphone and hear the sound coming from the copter. It's not something I use myself, but it is a nice feature. One thing I have heard is a problem with the Mr. Steele PDB is that because it is part of the structure of the copter, when you have a crash, it can bend and break, you know, just like the old Shuriken X1. Now, I haven't had any problems myself. However, I think if I was doing a fresh build like this today, I'd probably go with the Reverb frame and the Wolf PDB, because I think it's not structural. So if you have a crash, it's not going to bend or anything like that. But I already had this frame, so you know, I have worked it around that. There's also a neat spot to put a capacitor on the PDB if you need one, and all of the telemetry for the KISS ESCs run through it as well, and then that runs through the connectors, and you know, it's all set up. You just have to select the right options in KISS, which I will show you a little bit later. So as I say, the only thing you have to solder to the flight controller is your receiver, which in this case is the TBS Crossfire Nano, and those cost, I think when I bought it, it was 40 GBP, but I think it's now down to 30 GBP or 40 US dollars. Now at this point you might be thinking, how is this a $2,000 setup when we're only up to 460 odd GBP or $609? So that is just the cost of the copter. So you know, when you see these $100 kits or whatever, and then you build them up, you still need a receiver, transmitter, etc. That's where we're at this point, and it's 462 GBP or $609, which is expensive, but it's not $2,000. So where does that come from? Well, the answer, of course, is all the other stuff that you need to get it going. So I bought the full Crossfire system, that's 160 GBP. And then I've got a Brain 3D GoPro mount, alright, that's 10 quid, but the GoPro Session 5, when I bought it, was 200 GBP, and it's a struggle to find them under that now that they've been discontinued. The battery that I'm using is a GNB4S 1500 mAh, that is 17 GBP. The Tyrannus, I paid around about 200 GBP. You can now get that with the Hall effect gimbals built in for about the same price. You'll want a LiPo really for the Tyrannus, which will cost about 20 GBP. I think I got that from Get FPV. And of course the FPV goggles are a huge expense, and if you're going top end, you're going to want the Fat Shark HDOs, which I paid £500 for. I think it was a bit more than that actually. And I'm using diversity to get the best out of the video signal, so I'm using the Furious FPV True Diversity system, which was 64 GBP. And then I'm using 2 micro SD cards. One is for the GoPro, and the other is for the goggles DVR. They're the same one. I think I paid £27 for both of them, although you can probably use a lesser quality one for the goggles, but I tend to get the good ones that are, you know, about 32 gigabytes, something like that. Then the Menace and the Onway patch antennas, those come to around about £24 for both of them. And then we need to get onto chargers. I use the top of the line charger, the ISDT D2, and that's 106 GBP. And then I use like a 15 quid balance board with that. So the grand total with that added on is £1,805.99 or $2,381 which is quite a lot. Now, I'm not saying you need to spend this amount of money whatsoever. In fact, if you look at my channel, I think you could get going like this for around about $200, but I thought it'd be interesting to see what you actually get in terms of video feed and footage and stuff like that for going right to the top end. But the next thing that I want to show you is KISS and what that is like to set up. Okay, so here we are in KISS. I've got the copter connected to the computer. You can see the COM port there. I'm going to press connect and everything is super simple, just like the name. So it was already set up as Quad X and we've got default motor mapping. I did change the receiver to TBS CRSF there, and by the way, Crossfire is just so easy to set up. You just plug it in and the receiver automatically updates. You don't have to hold the button whilst you plug the battery in. You can just press the bind button and it binds and it just sorts everything out for you, and you can change the output to link quality. Just so easy there. And then if we come down to the PIDs, I just copied Final Glide Oz's PIDs from his video and also his rates, and these suit me just perfectly here, and I copied all of that too, so full credit to Final Glide Oz there. I did change some stuff around here, so I've got the min throttle at 1070 and the min command at 1000. I think if you keep this at 1000 then you don't have any control at 0 throttle, so I bumped that up to 1070. There's no air mode I don't think in KISS, but if you lift up the min throttle then you've got control at the bottom of the throttle. So D-Shot 2400 there, and then for my aux functions, very similar to Betaflight if you think about it. We have got the aux 2 to arm it, and then high, low and also medium. Those are just like your sliders in Betaflight. So high just means that it's to the far right hand side, so when I flick the switch the PWM value goes into the high mode and then that arms it. And then I've got the level on the aux 1, so auto level on the low position, so the copter actually starts in angle mode or level mode, and then if I move it one more time then that goes into acro. And I've got a buzzer on here as well. I did fit a buzzer, but you can do sort of like D-Shot commands just like you can on Betaflight. I've got the filter on high on here. That is everything on there. Oh, I've also got the failsafe level to 0 seconds as well, so there's no delay between the failsafe. It just stops the motors, and of course you want to test that as well. So into advanced here, I've got all of this turned off. I've got a little bit of RX deadband there so that it's smoother in the center. The device I've got as the OSD, you can see type here, IRC tramp, and then you can set the frequency up as well. You've got the low power at 25 milliwatts and the high power at 600 milliwatts when you set it to ARM, so you can do that through here as well, and you can do that through the on-screen display, and then you can emulate the buzzer with the motors, but I've got all of that off. Lap timer options down here, which I've got turned off as well. And then I've copied these from Final Glide Oz again, so set point weight 65, enable adaptive filter. I believe you have to have the loop time set at 1 kHz if you want that to work. And again, I've got the advanced LPF settings all set to high, your filter set to 35, and then LiPo alarm I've got turned off because I'm just going to be using the on-screen display for that. So data output, and here you can test things like the data coming from the ESCs, so voltages, and the current also comes through there as well. Something that you want to make sure that you do to get this working is those clips that clip into the PDB and the flight controller, make sure they're sat properly, otherwise this doesn't come through and your current meter won't work. And if you're having problems with the current meter, then take the props off, arm it, and you should get all of the values here. At least you know that it's going through to the KISS FC if it's not making it through to the PDB, but I'm not having any problems there. The PWM numbers are different than Betaflight, so motor 1 is here instead of here, so it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, so don't let that catch you out if you need to change the motor direction, which I actually had to do. You can calibrate the accelerometer here as well, and you can also monitor all of your PWM values, which I've got working fine. So rates, I copied Final Glide. Ours is rates again, but it just really works, and I copied some of the stuff out of here as well. You can flash the FC from here, very similar to Betaflight, so select remote firmware, and now you can flash the ESCs as well and change the motor direction. Just press I know what I'm doing. I think you do have to plug in the ESC for that. Okay, I've got the voice version there. You click I know what I'm doing there, and actually what you should get is a direction thing here, but what I think you have to do is, if I just disconnect from there and then reconnect, it can be a little bit buggy, go to ESC flasher, there you go, you can see the motors that I've had to reverse. This can be a little bit clunky as well, and we've got the serial numbers up there as well, because of course KISS uses all serial numbers, but for me this is so much easier than Betaflight is now, with just a couple of screens. And not only that, if you just copy some of this information, the copter flies superb. So let's get and take a look at that next. So it should be of no surprise that the video signal is crystal clear with no noise filtering through, and that's without a capacitor. And this is quite an amp hungry setup, with it being heavy as well. We can take a look at the amp draw. I think it goes over 100 amps. Look at that. So yeah, I mean, yeah, if you spend this amount of money, you are going to get a top-notch flying freestyle copter. My only issue with it is if it breaks, you know, and it's something major, then it's going to be out of the air for some time. I cannot have a couple of these going, whereas, you know, you can go cheaper and get decent results. I think I did a very cheap Martian build a few years ago. I know a Martian is a clone, but a lot of people are flying them to get into the hobby, and you do end up spending more and getting these more expensive frames, so I don't like to knock clones too much. Anyways, we had a speck of rain that came onto the camera lens, so I've switched over to the GoPro, and you will have heard the audio switch as well. So the audio that you were hearing before was the audio that comes through to the microphone on the Mr. Steele PDB. So very good audio quality and fantastic video quality through the GoPro, just super smooth. I love KISS for that. It just flies really nice, and it's different than Betaflight. I can't explain why it's different. Maybe something in the rates there, but yeah, they just, you know, they spend a lot of time on getting it right in KISS, and yeah, I like the setup. It's just the price that is gonna put people off, and I've never actually used their customer service as well, so it'd be great to hear about that, because again, you know, I always say if you get great customer service when you spend more, then it is worth doing so. But yeah, it's a little bit of a rainy day when I was flying this, so fairly short flight, but there you go. That is what you get for $2,300 if you really want to pile your money into a freestyle setup. And hey, maybe I should do a cheap build version of it. But until then, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.
SDC32M, detected. Ready. Yeah!